Guys, I got a very special guest, Mr. Charlie Smith here, who's also an alum from this school I'm about to go to, but he's a geopolitical strategist. So, welcome, Charlie.
Thank you, Jerry. Great to be here.
Definitely. So, let's talk about your life. Did you always know you'd become a geopolitical strategist? Did you always know you'd work in kind of this international relations kind of realm thing?
No, not at all. I grew up in Alabama, and in the 80s and 90s, it felt like a world away, and I loved it. But any sort of small introduction I got to the broader international world was fascinating to me, and so I always enjoyed thinking about that. But of course, this didn't really exist back then. It was just an interest of mine. And I actually went to an arts high school and ended up being a film major in college. And my dad was thrilled about that. But, I realized, what I loved about the film part was really learning about other people, learning about other cultures in the context of a story. And I think that storytelling piece is one thread that goes through everything I've done. So after I graduated, I'd done a lot of poli-sci stuff in college, but that didn't really crystallize for me until after college. I realized I did not want to work in film. I still kept it as something I loved, but leaned more into the international stuff. And so I spent some time in international business. I did operations side around logistics, supply chain management. I didn't really know what I wanted to do, and so it seemed as good an entry point as any. And I was lucky enough to start right before the financial crisis. So that was a fascinating window on, I worked for LVMH, so a massive, luxury goods company in the US, but worked with a lot of international people, which I loved about the role. But interesting to see how those dynamics evolved over the course of the financial crisis. But I knew there's this international thing I wanted to do, and I didn't know what that was. And I think the hardest part, like when I was at SAIS and talking with current and potential students, is that, the hardest thing is just knowing what careers and jobs are out there. It's so difficult. You think, like, I have two kids, and my wife and I joke all the time. You have like the Richard Scarry, like, Busy Town books, and it's like, these are the jobs. There's a fireman, there's a post office person, there's a baker. Like, these are the jobs. Of course, there's so many other jobs. There's so many cool jobs. How do you know what the hell's out there? So I left that job with nothing else lined up, and I went to the Middle East for a while, just to I had connections in Lebanon, and I thought, well, I'll meet a lot of people, I'll talk with people, see what it is I want to do. And that was really informative. I came back to the US. I lived in New York at the time. I spent about another year and a half doing logistics stuff while I sort of settled on what it was I wanted to be doing next. And I thought, well, I'll just milk this as far as I can, learn as much as I can. And I definitely reached that point. I maxed out, and I was done. And I didn't want to do it anymore. So I applied to grad school. Actually, I applied to SAIS, and I applied to another program, and I didn't get in. I didn't get in anywhere. And so I knew the general idea of doing sort of international stuff was only halfway for my process. I had to do something else. And so I left that second job and then went back out to the Middle East. And I actually had an unpaid internship that I worked at a policy institute for a while. But it was phenomenal. And I know I learned a lot then. And then that followed up with another internship back in DC. I worked with the Atlantic Council. And just through that process, I got a lot of exposure to different people, different careers. And through one of those internships, I discovered sort of political risk as a career. And this was 2012. And at the time, it was still pretty nascent. There's Eurasia Group, a few others. And but I was hooked. I knew that's what I wanted to do. And so then I applied to grad school again. I had a very clear path of what it was. Got in, no problem. Went to SAIS, had a great experience. Because political risk, geopolitics back then, it didn't seem so risky. It seemed, there was a happy-go-lucky world. I did work in a couple of consulting startups that did stuff overseas. So I was doing the international stuff. I was getting exposure to what I think we talked about this, sort of the so what of what you do. I don't want to just theorize about stuff. I want to do stuff. And those were great experiences too. And then, of course, after Russia invaded Ukraine in 2022, sort of that space blew up again. And that was my entry point to go back in it full time. And so I've been doing that ever since. So it's a long-winded way of saying I had no clue what I wanted to do, certainly when I was a kid. I didn't know what I wanted to do midway through adulthood, but then, I just kept, I knew the international piece was something I loved, and I just kept stepping out there and getting exposed to different people and ideas until I found the thing that resonated the most with me. And I was like, like this is it. It all makes sense. Off we go.
Yeah, and that's why I think I really appreciated talking to you at Admitted Students Day, because one of the things that tied me to, I think, why I wanted to go to SAIS and why I wanted to, in general, do stuff related to the international realm was just no matter what, the stuff I was doing was international, right? So
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
like a common theme between you and
Mhm.
I. And I
Mhm.
think talking to you, one of the things that everyone can learn is that obviously you're good with people because you were just able to tap connections and go to the Middle East multiple times. Like that is an ability that everyone needs to learn nowadays, especially now if people are so scared about AI. It's like, what can AI do that we can
Yeah.
do? Like we can do face-to-face stuff that AI still can't do for the next, I think, 10 years. I'm gonna give it 10 more
Yeah.
years. I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah. Who knows?
Yeah, exactly. So how was your time at SAIS?
It was great. And I think, it made me reflect on my undergrad experience and made me wish that I had had more sort of life experience when I'd gone to college. Um, and so, I had worked for several years before I went to SAIS. And, because I had this focused idea of what it is I wanted to do, you're just naturally more driven to hunt out things that are going to be relevant to that. And I mentor a lot of students from SAIS and both Hopkins mothership because I live in Baltimore. And the thing I tell everyone is like there's sort of the first trick is to find the job you want, but as specific as possible. Like find that lodestar, which is hard. That's a huge job, and it's specific to you, and no one can tell you. Um, but the benefit is when you find that thing, you're just going to go for it. And you're probably not going to get it, but that doesn't matter. You're going to find all these things along the way you didn't even know existed, and they're relevant to what it is you want to do. And you may actually have more fun doing one of those tangents. So, that was my experience. I knew this political risk thing was what I wanted to do. SAIS was the place to do it because, there was the theory piece, there was the history piece, and I'm a huge history nerd, so I love that. But then tying that into what does that mean for today? What's the practical impact? And how can we use that to inform sort of real world decisions like policy making, business, anything? So my time at SAIS was awesome. And I think because I had a specific goal of where I wanted to go, then it was a way to connect with people. I've done a lot, and so you connect with people that way. I think that there's an interesting point you made around like the sort of people to people ties, right? Like I could connect with people because I had more experience, but then I could also connect with people because like this is where I wanted to go, and maybe you've done something relevant, and you had something to root yourself to in those conversations and connections. So I loved it. Everyone I met at SAIS was great, and one thing that I reiterate to people is like and it's almost shocking. It's true. I've never met a single person who went to SAIS that was just like a jerk. Like everyone was great. Everyone is really, really awesome. They do interesting things. And they're interested in what you have done and what you want to do too. So it really is a great community. And again, I think in an AI kind of world, if anything, those person-to-person connections are going to become more important. And a place like SAIS is a place that continues to give to me. And I don't know. I don't want to just be a stand for SAIS and be like, they're not paying me to do this. Like I really do. It's really been a great benefit to me. So,
And
continue.
I will give you so much credit because after I talked to you, I really thought about, okay, what can I do? Like, what types of jobs can I do? Because obviously I've had tech experience and I'm going to get some policy experience and I've had media experience. And so I credit you, Charlie. Like, you really inspired me to think about, okay, like, what's a job I would love to do after
Yeah.
SAIS? And so, like, that is something very important. And again, you also taught me, which I passed to other people, like, have a goal, but if tangents happen, right? But like
Yeah.
having
Yeah.
that one thing is a good focus. And I'll just tell you, like, the result of me thinking about this, and I have to give credit to SAIS's panels, I found out about all these like cool jobs at tech companies that are policy related. So for
Mhm.
example, 2028, when I theoretically will graduate, there's an election year, right? I could do election monitoring at
Mhm.
certain big platforms. I'm
Mhm.
like, ooh, that could see like so like by
Yeah.
talking to
Yeah.
Charlie, I narrowed down something that could be a fusion, an interdisciplinary job that I could do very well. So again,
Yeah.
anyone that is at Hopkins in general who needs mentorship, I think Charlie's a good mentor. So I'm
Well,
gonna give him all the credit.
I appreciate that. It's it comes from the school of hard knocks. It's not. I didn't read it in a book. And to be honest, when I was an undergrad, the advice I got was either non-existent or terrible. I would ask people, and they'd say, "Oh, you want to make a career? Just put yourself out there." That's over and over. Just put yourself out there. Like, what the hell does that mean? Like I need concrete steps. So when I talk with folks, it's like, well, here's concrete stuff I've done. Here's concrete stuff to think about, to act on. Again, the so what, like I don't want to waste anyone's time. So I'm glad it was helpful. And hopefully it can be helpful to other people too.
Yeah, I remember as an undergrad, since both of us have done film stuff, the advice we would be given as filmmakers, you just go to LA, you'll figure it out. It's the
Yeah,
worst
yeah.
advice ever. You just go to LA, figure it out. Like,
What does that
what?
even mean?
Yeah,
Yeah. Work
yeah.
at a donut shop? I
Yeah,
like, come on.
exactly.
Yeah,
You
yeah,
just work work as a PA or work at a donut shop or somehow find your way, wiggle your way. If you're not a Nepo, somehow wiggle your way into one of the talent agencies, right? Those are the
yeah,
three ways. But it's
yeah.
like a little bit background for those of you who don't know what I did before, I had this channel. Like I had a lot of other channels. So
Mhm.
when I went to LA, a lot of the companies saw that, oh, this guy's on digital media. We don't know what we're doing on digital media. He seems to know a little bit more than us. Hey, let's hire
Mhm.
him. Right. So like
Yeah,
I didn't just move it. I was building stuff. I was building
yeah.
stuff. So I guess that's the part of like put yourself out there that I would say it's like
Hmm.
don't just like put yourself out there, but put yourself out there for a purpose. Like I knew
Yeah.
I had a passion for media. I had a passion for certain things like this. So okay, how can I put myself out there that way? But
Hmm.
just like randomly going to network. I mean, you could do that. Go randomly networking, meet people. It's okay, but like do it with the more purpose.
Yeah, yeah, 100%. And I think you're spot on. And I think like putting yourself out there is correct, but then you need tactics to fill that in.
Yeah.
And I always encourage people to create stuff, no matter what. Like always create stuff. It's so straightforward now to just make a Substack or like post on LinkedIn. I was not comfortable doing that until a few years ago, and I was like, you know what, like where I was doing the geopolitical analysis, like no one else was talking about it in this space. It was like real estate investment and FDI and things like that in that sphere. And so I was like, well, I'll just things I think about all the time, they're not thinking about. So even if it's obvious to me, I'll just put it out there. And so I just got in a cadence where like once a week, I'll just put something on LinkedIn. Sometimes it's an article, sometimes it's an original thought. And I didn't even reach out to other people. I was just putting things out there in the world, but I was creating it. And over time, I got outreach from people to speak at conferences, to write pieces for industry magazines, things like that. And then it expands from there. And I wasn't soliciting people in that sort of networking kind of way. And I think people fear networking because it's so transactional and yeah, it stinks. But if you have something to work with, even if it's just one piece you've written or like a small video you've done, say like you can tell someone, hey, I did a 5-minute documentary about this thing that I'm genuinely interested in. Then people be like, oh, you've done something. And that's all they remember is you've done something and you're a person who does stuff. So I think, yeah, to your point, like you showed up with like things you've done because clearly you like it. And so, it's just gonna snowball from there.
Yeah. A recent story that I tell people now, and it's thoroughly shifted my understanding of networking is so obviously another school I got into was Georgetown. So I was picking between Georgetown and SAIS.
Yeah,
So when I
fantastic
was
school. Yeah.
visiting Georgetown, I met this one professor and I ended up keeping in touch with her because she's a professor that even though she, is a professor in the international relations realm, she also has a BS in computer science.
Yeah, cool.
So
Yeah.
she knew that I had a lot of friends and family members that worked in the space. So she wanted to meet some of my friends, my family members. So through that, it's like she would invite me to events at Georgetown and I would introduce her to some of my friends and my family. So like that's natural. That's like natural
Yeah.
network. I was like,
Yeah.
wow. it occurs so naturally. We just became friends that way. It's like, right? If I knew that when I was out of college, I would have approached everything differently.
Yeah, and I think networking gets a bad rap because it feels so transactional, and then at the same time, you're not. I feel like so many folks aren't offered the opportunity to have that door open, where it's just like, just talk with people you already know, and like at this point, I'm 10 years out from SAIS, and just the people who were in my class for my program, that alone is an incredible network. I have a friend who just won a Pulitzer with the New York Times. I have another friend who speaks on TV with those other things. Like those are the sexy jobs, but like everybody is doing something interesting at this point. And I think the best advice I got before I went to SAIS was Elliot Cohen, who's now left, but also very passionate about mentoring. And he said, this degree isn't for your first job after SAIS. Like, and I'll be very upfront. That's the hardest part. Is it's always the first job after college, the first job after grad school. Just do something, anything. Just do something, and that's where the network comes in to help anybody you meet, through natural interest. But the degree really sets you up for all those successive jobs, because before you know it, I'm out 10 years, and it's like, oh, holy smoke! Like I know these people who do a lot of really fascinating stuff, and they're happy to chat with me at any time because we have this natural connection. AI is not going to replace that, and it just escalates from there in a positive way.
Yeah. And I think that's one of the things I appreciate about grad school now that you don't get in undergrad. Undergrad, people are a little bit in different realms, right? So it's hard to reach out to someone from undergrad, be like, hey, remember like we had undergrad together? Oh, but that this person might be an engineer, this person might be in nursing.
Yeah.
But in a more focused school like SAIS, it's like everyone's going to be at least having some similar interests. So there's more commonalities that 10 years down the line, you still have a lot of things to talk about.
Yeah, 100%. And my undergrad, like alumni network, such as it is has never been like a career benefit to me. I met my wife there. I have many close friends, and that's great. But both for friendships and for professional purposes, like in grad schools, it's in a totally different realm.
Yeah. One of the things I know some high school students even watch my channel. So one of the things I would tell them is if I could go back and do undergrad differently, I would go to a school that at least had a little bit more of a focus if I knew what I wanted to do, right? So like if I knew what I wanted to do, I would not just go to a liberal arts school. Like if you know a little bit what you want to do, go to a school that has like a focused program in that, because at least that cohort's going to be a little closer. Like seeing how close the SAIS mafia is, as they call it. Like, I realized, okay, if I went to University of Pennsylvania, right, but I didn't go to Wharton. If I went to Wharton, I would still be in touch with a lot of my cohort, because Wharton really packs you into that mode of, oh yeah, we're passionate about this. Okay, we're gonna really learn about this and be passionate about this for the rest of our lives, right? So like that's what I mean by like, if you know what you want to do, then go to a school that has a focus in that.
Yeah. And I think that's the big asterisk, right? Like if you have an idea about what you want to do. And looking back when I was younger, I was obviously really interested in film. I was also very interested in international stuff. And, I wasn't seeking out mentorship and advice and things like that. And I would definitely encourage people to do that simply as a sounding board. And it doesn't have to be someone who's in that space. It's just someone who has a little more experience and would know something about life. And they can help you to that degree. I think conversely, if you truly have no idea what you want to do, which, was more of what I was when I was younger, taking some time to work isn't a bad idea, because you're going to learn a ton. But then I think also being intentional about that time and doing some nascent, I hate to call it networking, but doing some nascent sort of building connections. Talk with your parents, talk with your family, be like, I'm interested in this, I'm interested in that. Do you know someone who does this or that? And then, they'll inevitably you'll find people to talk with. You can just reach out to people cold. And I think, I don't know if I mentioned this when we talked, but students in both undergrad and grad school and high school, anytime you're a student, you have a superpower. And the superpower is people are happy to talk with you. They truly are. Doors will just open magically. You're not asking for anything except, flattery of this person for their time. So it's strong recommend to just, it feels awkward. Everyone knows it, but then you start the conversation and it's great. So So just do it.
Yeah, exactly. So shifting back to your career now, when you sort of did the geopolitical strategy and you combined it with the real estate you mentioned, how
Mhm.
did that come about naturally? Or did you stumble on it? Tell me more about that.
Because I knew somebody there. I
Uh,
mean, it's just like, it's just how it is, you know? So, I had, you know, I think this is a good segue because, you know, the back then they just called it political risk when I graduated from SAIS. There wasn't a lot of geopolitical this or that. Um, but there was Eurasia Group. There were a couple other places. Like the paths were very narrow. Um, and I didn't want to sit around and wait forever for one of those to open up. I wanted to do something. So that's why I worked sort of in these consulting startups doing impact investment, international development stuff. It was a blend of things. But once, you know, that career had veered more towards international development, and I didn't want to do that. And so I left, and this was in 2022. And of course, because Russia invaded Ukraine, it was all going kind of crazy. I was just having conversations with people about what it is I wanted to do, and in the back of my mind, I was like, maybe this geopolitical thing will never pan out, but I know it's where I want to go. So even if there's things along the way that are close to it, I bet I'm going to like it. So I still kept going for it, and I'm glad I didn't quit because it was just a natural conversation I had with somebody who was like, "Oh, that's weird because we're creating this new role that does that." And I was like, "Well, for God's sakes, like, let me talk. Let me talk with this person." And like, one thing led to another, and yeah, they created this new role, and I was the person they interviewed for it, and that was it. So it really came about through connections, but in a genuine way. I wasn't forcing myself on anyone. I'm sure there's an elegant way to do that, but that's not how I do it. But yeah, it was fascinating, and I was really grateful for the experience too. This was at Newmark, and they're a global commercial real estate firm. Most of the company are brokers selling warehouses, office buildings, things like that. And that industry is in a huge shift, for so many reasons. And so I love getting to learn about that. I worked in an in-house consulting shop we would work with brokers and the real estate investment side. We would also work with site selection. So when companies look to find a location in the US or elsewhere, they got to run through a bunch of criteria about why they're going to locate in a place. And my piece was around, the policy environment, the political environment, the geopolitical environment. And so it was really interesting talking with folks about that because most of these people, they couldn't point out maybe some countries on a map, but they knew their business very, very well. So I was a true value add, in being able to shine some light on, things that we probably think about all the time, but other folks don't. And so it was a great experience in so many ways, if only to help reinforce why I like what I like, and then also ways to make it marketable and to make it useful. Again, getting to the so what, right? So it definitely helps sharpen things like writing and sales and marketing and all that, which are important for anybody.
I see. And right now, do you run your own consulting firm too, on top of all this?
Yeah. So right now, it's been most of the year. I've been an independent consultant, and a lot of what I do are presentations, especially for folks in economic development. So when we talk about FDI, these are the folks looking to attract the FDI. And they know their communities very well. They know their core businesses very well, but they're caught as flat-footed as anybody around the geopolitical environment and ways to navigate that. So that's a lot of what I do. I also advise some sort of political risk startups, here and there on because there's a lot that have emerged, and I try to add my 2 cents. So it's an interesting time.
So what is the day in the life like for you? Like, what is your day to day like?
One of the things I've loved the most about this period of being, independent is, you know, it just through pure luck, it coincides with this time of the rise of AI. And, I think for people who aren't native to the tech space, AI is this sort of terrifying, void, and you don't want to deal with it. And I was probably one of those people, but I've really enjoyed diving into it and making it work for me. So I've developed some of my own tools, around tracking news, tracking events, cataloging interesting things I find, because the quip around geopolitics or political risk is that 15 years ago, your job really relied on having connections and having intelligence. Now it's around gathering all this massive data and making sense of it. It's the complete opposite, and that's the space that I enjoy. So I've developed some tools to track interesting people, economists, journalists, all this stuff, and finding a way to keep tabs on that so I can start to piece together my own version of the story when I talk with folks, whether I agree or disagree. So a lot of what I do is on the research side. It's around writing. And then ultimately that informs things like, presenting or providing analysis reports, things like that. You have this, backlog in your head. You have these AI resources you've built, and then you can just, plug in what you need.
Yeah, that's so fascinating. And it relates to the fact, as a person that's Chinese American, I always tell people, like, a lot of the foreign policy stuff that you might hear about China, like, they talk about it publicly in
Hmm.
China. It's
Yeah.
just that there's a language barrier.
Yep.
And so the data's out there.
Hmm.
It's just, before probably the past few years when the generative AI age started, it's hard for people to kind of access and make sense of that all. But now,
Yeah.
the generative AI is like 80% there to translate and like analyze for you, even in a complicated language like Chinese. So yeah,
Yeah.
it's so interesting to talk about AI, and it's like, yeah, the data's there. And if you
Yeah.
can build AI tools to help you go through the backlog, bam, you suddenly have a part that you couldn't do, let's say 10 years ago.
Yeah. Two quick points to that. I mean, I came from a Middle East studies background when I was at SAIS. And unfortunately, it's the part of the world that like you always keep coming back to. Stuff always happens, so it's relevant. But I was not a China guy, and I didn't deal a lot with that space until the last year or two, and partly because we have all these tools now, and there's so much good writing and research out there for people who want to just share it. It's not even paid. It's just good. So I've been able to bone up a lot in this past year, and to exactly your point, there's tons of information out there readily available about when China's broadcasting a lot of the things they want to do, and then they do it. So it's not all some kind of clandestine operation. But yeah, and I think secondly, just being willing to navigate I think is in and of itself, like in this moment in time, a qualification for a job. And so to anyone out there who's hasn't become familiar with the AI tools, and you're looking for a job or will look for a job, simply go on Claude, get the lowest level paid account, start cooking up some tools, just play with it. Like, even if you're going to go on vacation, even if you're going to make recipes, anything, just play with it. And then you're going to be in an interview. AI is going to come up and you can say like, oh yeah, I built a couple tools, and people are going to go, wow, because the vast majority of people right now just they don't want to touch it. It's too scary. And so that's not going to be of value in a year or two, but right now it is. And I've seen that firsthand.
Yeah. So when you were at SAIS, did you take Arabic? Was that your language of focus?
Yeah, yeah. And I'd studied it when I lived in New York. In undergrad, I was so burnt out. I didn't the language I took was Old English actually, which was very cool. And I can still recite the story of Beowulf to my kids, and they love it. But I didn't actually study Arabic until after college, and caught the bug, and I continued to study it at SAIS. And yeah, it brought me to a level of confidence that was appreciated. I think if you want to get fluent, you just got to live out there. But it got me far enough.
That makes sense. I mean, that is the way to go if you want to. Like, when I traveled to China, even just a month, oh, my Mandarin just suddenly improved. Right? It's
Yeah,
that simple.
yeah, it's that simple.
Yeah. Is Arabic a subject, object, verb? Like the verbs at the end? Is that Arabic or not really?
No, Arabic you can move it around a bit, and in fact, more often than not, the verb will come first.
Okay.
But yeah, I mean, it's there's different ways to do it. I think the one of the curious things about Arabic is you can have a whole sentence be one word,
Oh,
because you'll add prefixes and suffixes that define the object and the subject, and So it's interesting. I mean, it's an awesome language. Every language is awesome, but it's no, and it's fun to write and it's fun to hear, but it takes a little time.
That makes sense. The other question I had from a geopolitical angle is, so we know that Russia invaded the Crimea region in 2014. So
Mhm.
what made that period different than 2022 when the Ukraine war, like official Ukraine war started? Was it just the scale of things?
Yeah. I mean, yeah, it was the scale, but I think it's a fair question to ask in general because that happened when I was at SAIS, and people were far more concerned about the rise of ISIS, and because that was concurrent, and that's what consumed a lot of the headlines. The stuff in Crimea, it felt like, oh, this is a backwater, it's not relevant, and certainly steps were taken to punish Russia, and there were financial actions and this and that. But obviously, it didn't disincentivize it from pursuing other actions. And I think at the time, when it was discussed at SAIS certainly, and I remember in those discussions, the general theme was that Putin's just playing a completely different game from everybody else. And at the time, not that it was harmless, but because there were no direct impacts on the US seemingly, or for most of the greater world, it's like, well, he's a real weirdo, and a pity about Ukraine. It's not fair, but like, I don't know what harm is it really going to do. And obviously, looking back now, you could point to a long succession, and at SAIS, this was part of what was being pointed out, especially in sort of the and the folks at SAIS who knew Russia, who knew Eastern Europe, who knew all that. They said, guys, there's a theme from Chechnya to Georgia to Ukraine. Like, this isn't isolated. But mostly the difference was certainly the scale. And I think also, at that point, the post-Cold War system was still seemingly robust. And when Russia invaded Ukraine in 22, it was not robust. It was clearly in flux. And so it seemed all of a sudden, instead of trying something to see if you get away with it, it seems like, oh, this feels like, pushing on the foundations of a global system that's already cracking. So it was the context and it was the scale.
That makes a lot of sense. And it also is a reason why you and I both were interested in media in undergrad, because the politics of attention, right? Everyone was scared of ISIS. To be fair, they were very messed up. So like that was in everyone's eye. So like where the attention goes, a lot of times the research, the funding, the policies go. So
Yeah, and coming on the heels of this long global war on terror, it was like, oh great, here we go again. Now ISIS, Al Qaeda's dead, but now we have ISIS. And, it's not an accident that that kind of terrorist activity is extremely media savvy. It's half the point. If it's not all the point. So it's effective. One form of being effective.
Yeah. And talking about that, like I see a lot of interesting propaganda. Like, I don't know why YouTube recommends it to me, but like it'll recommend me pro-Iran propaganda. I'm not saying like that stuff's always erroneous, but like I was like, wow, it's like Lego figures and stuff. I'm like, wow, people have been catching on to like how important the politics of attention are.
Yeah. And I mean, it's there's a few things like that, I think, in the world of today where we know enough to know. Like, for example, drones. If your military isn't centered on drone activity, then you're obsolete, like full stop. And I think the same goes for the media environment. If you're not flooding it with this sort of like clever content, then like you're lost. I mean, it's too easy.
Yeah, it's too easy. And again, giving credit to those people, like even though I didn't really watch it, once I realized what this was, I still remember the Lego figures. Like it's stuck in my mind. I'm like, that was brilliant, right?
Yeah, exactly. And it's like people I follow on Twitter are like, these are national security people, and they're like, no, damn, gotta hand it to them. Like, Iran, this is pretty funny, right? And it's like, and they make points that we debate here in the U.S. So they know what they're doing.
Yeah. So what is next in your journey? Obviously, you got this great firm, you consult and all that. Do you have like a 5-year plan? Do you have a 10-year plan?
Yeah. I mean, this is a really awesome moment in time to experiment and to play around with things. And so that's what I'm leaning into right now. I think longer term, this geopolitical space is changing so much. I would love to, reinsert at another larger firm to get more of that perspective. And it's the automatic downside of being by yourself is you don't have colleagues, right? And that's it. This is a point in time where I do want to bounce ideas off of people who know about this stuff, who know more than me about maybe many things. So I think next step that's where I would want to be going. Longer term down the road, I think this space gives you so much exposure to policy, to things that are happening in the world, both things that are, going sideways and things that are working really well. There's still plenty of opportunity out there. And I don't buy into sort of an overall negative narrative of this moment in time. We still, certainly in the US, have it very good. Not that, it's always supposed to be that way, but there's ways to build on that and ways to improve it and ways to take advantage of all this change to, sustain that goodness for us for a long time. So I would love to keep doing, sort of geopolitics, political risk for 5, 10 years. But further down the road, I'd love to be involved in public service in some form or fashion, because, it's what I do now and what I did at Newmark. You get a lot of exposure to economic development, the sort of developers, these people on the ground that you hear about in the ether, but they're all in their own way trying to make this world a better place. As much as like they can make that win-win for themselves and everyone else, like people really do try to do that. So you get exposure to a lot of different perspectives and ways of doing things. And I would be excited to bring that to a public service position, to find ways that, like, listen, we got a lot going on. We can't run away from this change. We just have to embrace it and enact some of our own change and lead the way on that. Like, I don't know what else defines this country except, continuous innovation for greater opportunity, So,
Yeah.
but for now, I got kids. I got this cool career. It's plenty.
Yeah. I always tell people, and this is why I felt the need to go into this space and go back to school. Even if the world order is changing, even if the world becomes more multipolar, well, it's not like all the different poles. Let's say one centered on Russia, one centered on China, one centered on America, and then maybe two centered in the African continent or whatever, theoretically, okay? It doesn't mean they're not going to interact. Okay,
Yeah.
it's just like there's always going to be need for people who can see cross culture, see across different ethnicities, etc. Like,
Yeah.
okay, maybe America's not going to be like the world police anymore, but even let's say something like the UN. Well, okay, maybe America's going to spend less for the UN. Well, other countries are going to spend more. Like,
Yeah.
it's not like the world's just going to suddenly go to like, okay, we're not talking anymore, we're not trading anymore, or like the
No,
world doesn't change.
it's my biggest bugaboo, hands down, is the past couple of years, people who aren't specialists in sort of geopolitics or this international space love to opine about how globalization is dead or dying, which is flat out wrong, because we're stuck with this world,
Yeah,
whether we like it or not. And it's been moving in one direction for hundreds, if not thousands of years. So, it's changing, but it's still very globalized, and it's only going to keep. I mean, like the fact that like you go on YouTube to learn how to bake a cake and you're seeing a Lego video from Iran. I mean, like, point in case. So, we do have to have people who know how to work with all this, but I think even more than that, just being comfortable with it. I think it's like the AI piece. It's just, and I think that's one thing about SAIS. One thing it prepares people for is just having a comfort level with that ambiguity. And I saw something the other day. One of my pet sort of interests is around AI impact on employment.
Mhm.
And I think we talked about this. I'm more bullish than maybe the zeitgeist is, but there's a piece around, students are nervous because it used to be you get a major, like, let's say, yeah, you love programming, you're going to go to computer science, you're going to do that for 20 years. Like, yeah, not anymore. So like, you're not going to have a lifelong career based on that undergrad, but I sure as hell didn't. And I can tell you, it's been a super rewarding career. I've loved my career. Sometimes it's like, I don't know what the hell I'm doing, and that's fine. and then it forces you to find your way, and you do, but you did it yourself, and so it's what you want to be doing. So I think there's a lot of challenges and risks right now, but I think it's going to open up so many more opportunities
Yeah.
that we can't even think of now.
Yeah. Yeah. Agreed. As part of what you do, I'm sure you've interacted with a lot of other countries. What do you see in their approach to AI that might be different from ours, from your perspective?
Yeah, here's the thing where I'm light on China, and it's funny because years ago, um, I'll admit that like my wife actually went to China when she graduated from college. This was 2005, and so like I think back on like what her trip there must have been like what a crazy point in time. Um, and so I kind of learned from her experience, and I was like, well, I feel like I got the gist. I don't know if I really need to go, but now I am dying to go. I would kill to go to China and see what that is like. It's a huge place. Like you can hardly see anything, but I think that approach to AI is something I'm very interested in, like weaving it into everyday life, the way they use it for shopping, manufacturing, for everything. Um, I think for the U.S., what's really interesting is that institutionally we're real gung ho, and then on an individual level, everyone's like, "Stop the world! I want to get off." So I don't that's the political challenge, is that we have to have data centers, we have to have AI if we want any of this to work in the next like 5 years, let alone further. um I'm not saying there aren't any drawbacks to any of that, but you have to do it. So I mean, mostly what I see is, and this is what's interesting, is that there's always like a thin class of people who are super interested. Wherever you go, there's always a class of people super interested. And it just depends on what kind of pressures they face. And I think what's interesting about, emerging markets, and, emerging economies, is that they often face more pressure to be an entrepreneur, to come up with something new, because the old institutions aren't sufficient. Drawbacks to that, but the opportunity is there too, where possible. And I think when you have more diverse economies, when you have more open countries politically, there's a way for individuals to do that. I think, for example, I was in Ukraine the other week, and they're a pretty AI forward country, because they got to reach for every tool they can. And so on one hand, they have this like very long history. They have a deeply embedded culture, which is seeing its own changes with what's going on. But at the same time, they're embracing AI, they're embracing drones, they're embracing this new tech, because they have to. And it turns out they're really good at it. And so I think it's a way of showing people, like, yeah, really, anyone can do this. You just have to force yourself to do it. And I think no one in the U.S. wants to jump off that cliff yet. There's like that group of people who do, and they realize like, oh, I'm flying. This is great. But yeah, I do think broadly there's a similarity in those countries around that embracing of AI. There's a group of people who understand it can be a huge, positive force, even if there are drawbacks, and then everyone else just wants to stick their head in the sand. And how certainly at least Western democracies deal with that the next 5-10 years is going to be definitive.
Yeah, yeah. This is such a great conversation, and I would like to invite you too. So I have a group of people who work in the tech space, and some of them are in policy too. And we just get together once a month, and we just kind of informally, we don't record it, we don't broadcast it, but we just kind of talk and like bounce ideas off each other. I would love to invite you to a future conversation like that.
Sounds great. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, and that's what we need. It's like, and I think that's the fun thing about AI. It's like no one's like right. Maybe a couple people are wrong, but broadly, it's just sort of like, what about this? What about that? What about this? What about that? And I find that invigorating, and broadly positive.
Yeah. And the thing that I think I've been starting to appreciate about, let's say, something you do, or just people in general who do more of this type of consulting work, is that I've been going through life for many years wondering, how can society be less siloed, as in like people don't talk to each other across disciplines. And I'm like, but the consulting industry, those people have to not just be a specialist in one area, depending on which company, what job, which region, they're going to have to learn about maybe tech policy here, oh, maybe like energy policy here, maybe oil here, right? Like, so I was like, for people who want to be a generalist, but also a specialist. So like hybridizing both of those things, because I don't think you should put a strict separation between a generalist and a specialist. I think roles like what you do, what probably I'll end up doing, it's like, that's what society actually needs more of.
Yeah, no, I think you're absolutely right. And I think, what I've learned, I worked in logistics. I joke, I've had so many different careers. My first job, I was actually a projectionist. Like I loaded film into a giant projector and it was a blast. I loved it. But like, I've done sales, I've done consulting, I've started a couple small companies. I mean, I've done lots of different things. And at the end of the day, it's like, well, I just need to know what questions to ask. And if anything, that's where AI is so empowering, because it's like, I actually do have a lot of stupid questions, and AI is the perfect tool to reach out to like get an idea about those stupid questions. And I've done enough stuff to know like, well, let me put these parameters on it or know when to push back. I'm lucky at this point. Like I've been working for long enough to have some of that experience. But I think for anyone else out there, it's like, yeah, just ask a bunch of questions. Like, and then you get used to asking good questions.
Yeah, I love what you said, because back in school, like I would say pre-college, but even undergrad, college, they always say like there are no stupid questions, right? The only stupid question is the one that's not asked.
Yeah.
But sometimes it's like, it's not that we don't want to ask that stupid question, but we know there's a way to refine it or ask it better. That's why we don't ask the question. So that's a place where AI comes in. Like ask that initial quote unquote stupid question so you can refine it. So then when you feel like, okay, maybe AI is not getting to the point anymore, or I don't know what parameters to put on, then you ask the expert. Your question is going to be a brilliant question.
Yeah. And I think that was one thing I discovered at SAIS. Definitely in undergrad, I never wanted to ask the stupid question. And at SAIS, I had less fear around that, because part of it was just like I had matured a bit. I didn't really care anymore. And when I take Arabic, I was more comfortable. In undergrad, I didn't want to do it. I didn't want to make mistakes. But then, Arabic's so flipping hard that by the time I was at SAIS, I was like, I'm going to make mistakes all day long. And like, I'm just going to blurt out all this kind of stuff, and they're going to correct me in front of everybody. Then I'll immediately learn and always remember what that was. And so I think grad school is a good encapsulation of that, like asking tons of stupid questions, but there's a point to it. It's not because you haven't read stuff, it's not because you don't know what you're doing. It's like, but I'm trying to think about it, and the teachers know that, and AI can be a helpful tool on your own or in a group as well to like, well, I think I see where you're going here. It's like, yeah, you get it, and then you can move forward.
We talked about a lot of stuff, and I would definitely want to talk more with you. So I would say maybe in the middle of my semester when it gets started in the fall, or maybe during my winter break or something, we should do another conversation. I'll definitely
100%.
have more insights. I'm sure you'll have more insights too.
Yeah, 100%. And I mean, we can always talk about geopolitical things, because Lord have mercy, it's always something new every day, and that's the fun of it. I mean, for better or for worse, it's objectively fascinating. So there's no shortage.
And so maybe what we can do is, if there's a geopolitical issue that's in your area of expertise in the future, we can talk about that too. So we can dedicate like a whole video. I have another channel that might be more fitting for that. It's more like sometimes I'll look at the news and stuff like that. So like you're going to be on 2 channels of mine. So I got like 20 channels. So eventually give you all 20 channels.
See, this is natural interest just leading to other things. And that's just how it works. It's like, it happens before you know it.
Yeah. Before I let you go, so obviously you do Ukraine stuff. What other areas do you really focus on right now?
There's a few issues I've been chewing on, certainly more over the past 6-8 months. FDI is one. Really curious about where that's been, and that gets a little technical, but to the point of sort of the so what. It's a really helpful thing I can impart to people, how that's been changing. Certainly the Middle East, my old home base. I can't even begin to describe the utter tsunami of change that Middle East is going through on a day-to-day basis. So that's a big one. Certainly the impacts of AI on the economy and on employment. That's not something I've dug into a lot before, but given the capacity for change that holds, it's just on everything. I want to get into it. And I didn't do a lot in Latin America until my last job at Newmark, but the Newmark has a outstanding presence in Latin America, and I work with colleagues who are in Latin America and learned a lot from them. So I've gotten into it a lot more, and I keep closer tabs on Latin America certainly than I used to. And it's an really interesting space because this idea of like military conflict is sort of growing all around the world, but not in Latin America, which is interesting. And it's just very unique dynamics, and there's a ton of change going on there too. It's fascinating. It's like anything. The more you learn about it, the more you're like, oh wow, I don't know anything, and it's really interesting. So yeah, those are certainly some things to keep a close eye on. And the last thing I think would be sort of the state of the European economy. I think it's not a sleeper issue. People are looking at it, but it's not a sexy issue. I'll put it that way. There's this China Shock 2.0 going on, and that's hitting Germany especially hard. But then you have other countries, years ago, the Greeces, the Spains of the world, they were drowning. And now it's like, wait, what happened? Like it was inevitably with a good story. You never hear that in the news. It's always you always hear about ISIS and Russia. I never ever count out any place that has a lot of human capital, and Europe is certainly, they have that, and they also have a ton of money. So I'm really interested to see where they're going to go. They don't like making drastic change until they absolutely have to, and I think they will, and that'll be interesting to see.
Wow. And I guess this inspired the last question, which I think is a very prescient one, or just one that I think is on a lot of people's minds. Since you do have an expertise in the Middle East, what is a common misunderstanding that like an average American has of the Middle East that all these years you're like, if we could just correct this 1, 2, or 3 things.
Oh Lord, where to begin? Say that now I know too much. This is going to be like a whole series. But I mean, it's as with anything, it's the benefit and the curse of America is that, our neighbors are Mexico and Canada, and then 2 giant oceans. So we're so removed from everything, and it's obviously broadly a pro, but the con is that things are really far away. And like, I have a friend who's like considering going to India, and it's like, geez, like even these days, like getting to India takes a day and a half. It's really far away. So as with any region that's so far away, it's easy to want to simplify the Middle East, but the diversity of opinion within the Middle East is as robust as anywhere. And I spent more time in Lebanon than any other country, and one thing I love about it is a diversity of opinion within the country, and you hear more about it because it's a relatively more open society in terms of communication and media. But yeah, there's always something else going on below the surface, and even within like the Gulf countries, the UAE left OPEC a couple of weeks ago, right? And it's like, that wasn't on my bingo card. And I'm someone who watches the Middle East, among other things. So things can take twists and turns. And, as I'll end with sort of a devil's advocate and say that, for many, many years, in fact, I would say that the US and Iran actually have more policy alignment than many of the US's allies in the region. There's both of them had a strong anti-terrorism focus. They were both, neither of them liked the Taliban. They were focused on a lot of the similar things, but of course you had this one dividing thing, which was totally impossible to overcome around the nature of the Islamic regime there. But it's just interesting, right? And there's a reason why Iran was our ally for so long until the revolution, and why we were so keen on keeping them as our ally. That was the foundation of our Middle East policy until 1979. So I'll put this in people's thoughts and say that I wouldn't be surprised if at some point, not in the near future, but maybe in the medium to long term, if Iran changes position, they could become a friend real fast. I wouldn't be surprised by that. And regimes often become far more brittle following a conflict meant to destabilize them than they are during the conflict, right? And Iran knows that. So there's going to be a huge crackdown when this war ends in Iran. But they'll be very vulnerable. And, if another Islamist regime emerges, but they're less revolutionary, more pragmatic, then I wouldn't be surprised if we were willing to work with them. And Saudi Arabia and others may be very happy with that arrangement. So you really never know.
This is awesome. And I think definitely we got to bring you back just to do a whole Middle East talk in the future.
Oh, boy, howdy. Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. I love it. I love it. Yeah. So this is just the first talk with Charlie Smith, and we will have much more. So yeah, shout out SAIS. And I'm probably going to tell SAIS that I'm going to, everyone I meet who's cool, I said, I'm just do a whole series. So Jerry Inspired is going to be filled with SAIS. I'm going to have a playlist of like SAIS alum. So
it's a whole new channel. It's a whole new channel. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So, do you have like a Substack or something that people can find you on or anything like that? Or I guess we can share your company if your company has a website or something like that.
No, I mean, my presence is on LinkedIn, honestly. And, I don't like putting out useless content. And I do try to put stuff out about once a week, and sometimes it's reposting things, but I wrote a piece recently around sort of the geopolitics of AI, how that impacts things like data centers and data center development in the U.S. And there's some interesting, developments going on there to speak to the policy challenge we talked about. But yeah, that's the place to do it. I should do a Substack or something like that. I should follow my own advice. We'll see where that goes. Usually I do more long form pieces elsewhere, but yeah, LinkedIn is the place to find.
Okay, cool. So I will link your LinkedIn. That's pretty funny. I guess that's why they came up with that name, right? I will link your LinkedIn when I put this talk out. So everyone, this was Charlie Smith, and more interviews to come.
My pleasure.